D.C., we're honored to have U.S. Congressman Ron Kind. We couldn't have these without our sponsors. Our sponsors include payroll and bookkeeping. I'm going to take this off for a second so I don't. Heartland Farms, Enbridge, and Domtar. And again, we thank all of our sponsors. What we're going to do this morning, we will start with an opening session. U.S. Representative for the 3rd Congressional District, Ron Kind, joining us from D.C. this morning. Following his presentation and questions, we will move to the in-person legislative session. But to honor America, if you would please stand if you're able, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Good morning, Congressman. I'm not sure he can hear me. We were having a little glitch on communicating back to him.
We're good to go? Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Listen, I'm going to keep my remarks brief so I can hear directly from you. Good morning. Welcome to springtime in Wisconsin. I'm reporting from Washington today. Listen, it has been one long, brutal year with the coronavirus after it hit our shores. It's been all hands on deck, trying to keep people safe while trying to keep our economy functioning at the same time. But clearly, we see light at the end of the tunnel. We're just not sure how long that tunnel is yet. So there's still some necessary precautions we have to take. But the end is near, and we're working diligently to get shots in the arm without the herd immunity, so we can get all the kids in the classroom where they belong. We can fully open up our economy and have it firing on all cylinders. With that in mind, we worked hard earlier this year to get the American Recovery Act passed. Fortunately, we did pass it. President Biden signed it into law last week. Help is arriving already. Obviously, a $1,400 rebate check, very popular. It'll help people pay bills, buy some time until we can get everyone back fully functioning again in the economy. Continued help and continued support for small businesses and family farmers through the Paycheck Protection Program. We extended that out another 3 months, given the demand for that. Help in ramping up production of the vaccines and getting those shots in the arm. Also continuing help for frontline healthcare workers who are really the unspoken heroes of all this, including our public health departments and the directors and their teams. They have been absolutely terrific throughout all this. We also had a major expansion of the child tax credit. That will lift over half of the children currently in poverty out of poverty over the next year. So we're also delivering some short-term relief to backfill state and local budgets. With that in mind, I was just on the phone with Mayor Lisa of the state of Point in regards to what their immediate needs are. He said they talked about $1 million shortfall just with parking fees and tourism and sales tax, well, just a drop off in the economy. And so there is a great need there. And we'll be working closely with the local communities how best we can deploy that and make sure that no further damage is being done. So there's been a lot of activity on that front. And as we peer into the future, we're still hoping to make a run at a bipartisan infrastructure reinvestment bill. It's time to start rebuilding Wisconsin, rebuilding America in the way it should be. Not just the roads and highways, bridges, ports, and airports. While there's great need for that, but I'm working on a national broadband task force to make sure that there's a major chapter in broadband expansion and high-speed internet connection. The coronavirus certainly highlighted the digital divide, along with the economic and education disparities that flow from it. We can't afford to be leaving anyone behind, especially in our rural communities. So access to that high-speed internet connection is going to be crucial, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward on that a little bit later this year. I still serve on the Ways and Means Committee, the Health Subcommittee, the Trade Committee. We're trying to get the trade agenda back on track again. That would be vital for production agriculture and family farms. That open up those export markets again for them. They're very good at producing food. There's a hungry world that needs to be fed. It'd be a win-win in helping support domestic commodity prices to keep our agriculture sector vibrant and functioning in Wisconsin. And then on the healthcare front, we are blessed with great healthcare providers in our community. I'm still trying to drive the healthcare system to a value and outcome-based healthcare system where you're rewarded based on how good you're delivering healthcare, what those quality measurements are, rather than the old fee-for-service system that pays on the number of tests, number of procedures, number of things that are done regardless of results. And that's led to unnecessary expense, bad outcomes in the healthcare system, and we're moving in that direction right now. I am an impatient person when it comes to this, so I'm continuing to drive these alternative payment models. I really try to get the healthcare system towards patient-centered, integrated, coordinated healthcare, but with good quality outcomes based on data analytics, good measurements that we will reward. And I think if we do this right, we're going to get better quality of care at a much better price. So those are some of the things coming up out here. We'll be interested to hear your thoughts, any feedback that you might have, but it's going to be an ongoing project, especially with the Recovery Act funds now being delivered back home in our local communities to try to get this economy up as quickly as possible and fully functioning again. Angel, one point of concern that I have, this existed before the coronavirus, and it's going to be a major challenge as we come out of it. It's going to be workforce shortages. Demographically, we've been in a bad spot as a country. 70 million baby boomers beginning to massively retirement, leaving the workforce. We do not have a baby boom following them. And we saw this shortage even before the virus came. There wasn't a business large or small that I visited. I wasn't complaining about the need for more skilled workers and just the ability to expand what they're doing. This will be a major challenge as we move forward. So I'm going to be working with the workforce development boards back home to see what more we can do doing training-wise. But it's also a question of bodies, getting them back into the economy. And I see two viable solutions to it right now. One, we have to make joining the workforce much easier. Obviously, with the virus hit, most of the burden would be taking care of the kids, their education, virtually taking care of sick loved ones, fell on the shoulders of women in our society. We have to make it easy for everyone, including women, to participate in the workforce. That means family and medical leave policy that makes sense, so that we're not having to choose between having to show up at work and taking care of a sick loved one or child at home. And it also means quality child care opportunities in our community too, which is holding too many people back from joining the workforce. And the other area of potential increased labor supply is a sane immigration policy. We've got a broken immigration system right now. It's not working very well. Yes, we have to do border security for the South and not be a country with open borders. There's certainly skilled and unskilled labor needs to be addressed on that immigration front. So yesterday we passed two bills in the House. One, the Dreamer Act. Those are for those kids that were brought to our country through no fault of their own, who are fully integrated, who are as American as any of our kids are today. And it'll make it feasible for them to stay, be productive members of our country, rather than being sent back to a country they have no relationship with, no connection with. It was the right thing to do, the main thing to do, and it's going to benefit us economically too. And the other bill we passed is the expansion of the H-2A farm worker provision. I've heard from many of our farmers the need for farm labor, especially in the dairy industry. And we fixed that with that legislation. Dairy is 24/7. 365. It's not seasonal. In the past, most of those work visas went to seasonal workers, not full year-time workers. The bill we passed will address that and take care of our dairy industry back home too. So we're going to need to think creatively how we're going to be able to have a strong, vibrant labor pool to tap into to meet our growth needs of the nation, or we're not going to get there. It's going to be very difficult on all fronts. A growing economy solves a lot of problems, including annual budget deficits that we're wrestling with here in Washington today. And we've got to be thinking about the labor we need and how we're going to be able to fill those positions as we move forward in the future. So let me just stop there. Also, as mentioned, I'm very focused, as many of you have been, on the personal situation in Rapids. 950 workers and their families impacted last year. A couple weeks ago, I was on the phone with the CEO, the new CEO, Virgil, along with his management team, trying to get a sense of where they're going with it, trying to push them to start making some decisions. I know there's a lot of frustration in the community about the lack of action being taken I know there's a bid by the co-op that they submitted to, and I was trying to get a sense from Versal just what direction they're going. I wish I had some clarification to offer today. They weren't that forthcoming. Did get the impression though that they didn't want to sell it to some entity that might prove to be a competitor against them in the future. They also mentioned that because of strong steel prices on the market, that the idea of just scrapping the plant is a viable option for them too. But we're just not clear yet on what they're doing. I and others we've been working with, pushing them, try to make a decision to get going so that there's some certainty for all those families that were impacted. Glad that we were able to get the trade adjustment assistance funding for those displaced workers. Many of them been able to take advantage of that, going back to mid-state tax, for instance. I've had a conversation with a few of those workers that benefited from that. Also, the subsidy for continued COBRA coverage, the healthcare coverage. These are things that are necessary to do to help mitigate the damage being done with it. But I know it's a major concern about the impact for the whole region of our state. And rest assured, I'm very focused and continuing to think of creative ways how we can deal with that situation. All right, so let me stop right there, Angel, and open it up on your end.
So we're typing the questions. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We can hear him, but he can't hear us. So I just asked him, can you explain the American Rescue Plan and how it helps local businesses?
Yeah, there are many facets to the American Rescue Plan. First of all, the continuation of the Paycheck Protection Program and the idle loans. I know a lot of our small businesses were able to qualify for that, working with the local lenders. God bless our local lenders who were able to stand that up as quickly as they could, even with some shady guidance coming out of SBA and Treasury, but we had to work through that. It was also a godsend for many of our family farmers. I, in particular, working hard to make sure our family farmers qualified for that P3 program, because they are small businesses like any others. And initially, they weren't qualifying. Then we had to deal with the fact that family farmers are capital intensive, a lot of expenses. It was hard for them to show any type of profit and a loss of profit accordingly. So we're able to fix that through the recovery package and the CARES Act too. But beyond support for small businesses, obviously cranking up production on vaccines. The president's going to announce today that they're able to inoculate 100 million Americans already in this country. And the Recovery Act is going to be able to expedite the production of that so that the supply catches up to demand. And I'm proud that Wisconsin has been able to set up those vaccination sites throughout our communities, working with our healthcare providers, Walgreens, some of the larger retail pharmacies that have stepped up. And because of that effort in the state, we rank in the top 5 as a state as far as when we receive doses, how quickly we're able to get into arms. We need to just continue that track record. But it all starts with making sure the supply catches up. The Recovery Act focuses a lot of resources on that front. Plus, resources, money for education to get our classes up again, and get the kids in school, both at the K-12 level and higher education. I know I've spoken to a lot of higher ed students in tech school and the 4U campuses that we have, and they've been very grateful for receiving the funding that they've received under the CARES Act and now the Rescue Plan. Make it feasible for them to stay in school and continue to develop the skills that they need so they can be productive. And so that's worked really well. Increase the tax credit, the per child tax credit too, I think is going to make a big difference. And then the support for our healthcare providers again, who have been challenged. And then we're going to need to follow this closely, but there's been some short-term relief for state and local budgets that have been impacting the revenue drop-off. There are some guardrails on the use of that money. So I'm trying to get more information out in the hands of our councils and boards and mayors. I was just on the phone with Governor Evers the other day too. The state of Wisconsin will be getting roughly $2.3 billion in funding for this. So we'll need to be smart in the use of that. And obviously there's going to be great need back home, again, on a temporary basis, just to make sure that we buy some more time until the economy is fully recovered.
Thank you. Did anyone from the group have any questions for the congressman at all? Okay, I have a few more for him. How are you addressing the technology issues that are experiencing in rural areas?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the digital divide is real. It just became amplified because of the coronavirus. We saw how difficult it was, especially in rural areas that didn't have access to high-speed connection, and how hard it was for virtual learning. And listen, we've all been kind of virtual out at this point. Most of our lives have been one virtual meeting after another. But it just increases the emphasis on the need for us to build out that capability, being able to deliver high-speed connection to every inch of our territory. And one of the greatest races that we're in right now globally is the race to 5G. Whatever country wins that race is going to be able to set the rules of high-tech interaction and trade for decades to come. China got a jump start on this, to be quite frank. Other countries are moving forward very aggressively. There's additional money in the rescue plan to build on broadband access, especially in the rural areas. Wisconsin PSC just awarded many grants yesterday throughout the state to build up. And I think it's going to require a strong public-private partnership. We all know what the problem is. The ROI in that last mile, especially in rural areas, is not profitable, and therefore a lot of the private entities, the for-profits, are reluctant to build that out on their own because the return on investment isn't there. So just like the 1930s with rural electrification, I think there's going to have to be a public partnership with this to incent the build out of that in rural communities especially, or it's not going to get done, or it's going to get done extremely slowly and very painfully. And we just can't afford to wait around again because of this race to 5G. So I had made this a priority. I'm serving on a national broadband task force. We were able to get some money in the rescue plan for it. We're hoping with an infrastructure bill that will be a major chapter for the federal role in helping build this out at the state and local level.
Thank you. Last call for any questions for the congressman. Oh, go ahead. Oh yeah, you can come right up here. He can hear if you're this close.
Good morning, Congressman Kine. This is Chris Stines from Aspires Riverview. Good to see you again, and happy belated 35th birthday.
Yeah, it's the anniversary of my 29th birthday.
We almost share a birthday, so that's how I know. 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you for your work on trying to get more broadband depth in our rural communities. To your point about value versus volume, or volume versus value, we at Aspires are working on a biosensor grant to essentially help track patients' outcomes real time. But in order to do that for folks in our rural communities, they have to have a strong bandwidth to be able to connect to our EMR, electronic medical record. So that's important for us to accomplish both things that you mentioned. So thank you for your work on that. And then the second point I wanted to make around healthcare, or actually worker access to workers in Wisconsin, is what we've seen in healthcare around the pandemic. We've seen a large exodus of workers that are retiring early, a large group of folks that used to work in other industries that came into healthcare that are now going, wait, I don't know if what I signed up for, this wasn't what I signed up for. So we've seen also a large group of people going back to work in other industries. So the work that you could do to try to help bring healthcare jobs to Wisconsin, particularly with our aging population, which you already mentioned, I think would be great value to us.
Well, I hear you, and thanks for the great work you're doing at Aspires. I'm fortunate that I represent an area with some really quality healthcare providers, so all I got to do is just pay attention and learn what you're doing, the creative and innovative ways you're delivering quality healthcare in our own communities, and then try to sell that at the national level. I've said repeatedly that if we could do what most of the healthcare providers in Wisconsin are doing nationally, we wouldn't be facing this healthcare crisis and the challenges that we do in the healthcare system. There's one kind of positive element that's coming out of this horrible last year with the coronavirus. It's the advent of telehealth. That has just exploded, and there's no going backwards in my mind. The patients want it, the healthcare providers want it. I, on the health subcommittee, have to make sure that we're aligning the reimbursement incentives correctly to maintain the feasibility of telehealth. But you're absolutely right. It does start with high-speed internet connection in these rural areas to make telehealth work and work well. And then we look forward to continuing to work with you and developing those quality measurements. And like most things today, economically, it's all about data analytics, collect the data, analyze it, find out what works and what doesn't work, continue to drive that back down into the hands of our healthcare providers and our patients so that they can make good decisions with it. Man, we're going to be able to transform a healthcare system that's going to get us better quality of care at a better price. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I know you are on a tight schedule, so we will let you go at this time. Again, thank you so much on behalf of the Heart of Wisconsin and then our local communities here in central Wisconsin.
Thanks again, Angel. And you guys all stay safe. We'll look forward to doing this in person. Again, this will be the year when we can start hugging our extended family and doing the social business. And boy, everyone's often pent up. But let me just caution people too. These new variants are real and they're very potent. So we do need to be somewhat cautious still. And I know the end is getting close as far as the inoculations, but we do need to try to stop the spread of these variants that are more contagious and can prove more deadly. I just hate to see us suffer a serious step back when we're so close to the finish line with all of this. And then do what we all can to encourage people to get vaccinated. I know there's a little vaccine hesitancy. That's human nature. Kind of wait and see how this ultimately works. But we really do need as many people as possible to participate, get vaccinated, develop a herd immunity so we can get back to normal as quickly as possible. But thanks so much. I'm sorry I got to run off here this morning, but we'll look forward to doing this again soon. And take care of Amy Sue for me. She's my eyes and ears on the ground back home, so great point of contact in my office. Amy Sue does a great outreach in the community, so if you need anything, give her a shout. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you again, Congressman.
Okay. Again, thank you for the questions, and you know technology works and we got through it. And thank you to the team from Heart of Wisconsin. At this time, we're going to just take a couple of minutes. If you haven't enjoyed breakfast or you need a refill of juice or coffee, please do that. Give us a few minutes to kind of reshuffle the deck up here and we'll get ready to talk to our local elected officials. So don't leave, but you can please just take a couple minutes and give us a chance to get everything more live than virtual. Thank you. Okay, if we could start rejoining here. Senator, we're missing one of your representatives. So.
I'll track him down.
There he comes. You know, Scott, we had to make fun of you. That's just normal.
That's the way it goes here, right? That's right. It's actually a legislative breakfast. It's a Scott Krug roast.
Yeah, you forgot to tell you.
That's how it works best, though.
Let the record show you decided to dress like the senator this morning. Is that what you're doing? There we go. Again, thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience. It's always good to be able to have an audience with our elected officials, both either on a local, state, and especially a federal level. So this part of the program, I have questions for the legislators, but as normal, you will have an opportunity to ask those questions or questions that you have with your particular businesses. So we'll start with Senator Teston. Just an update kind of what you're working on this session. You talked about a few things at some of the local chamber events in the past. Just kind of like what's going on in the Senate side in Madison.
Sure. Well, great to see everyone. It's hard to believe that our last legislative breakfast was almost a year ago, right as we were on the cusp of the pandemic, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but as a year has gone by, as it's been echoed by Congressman Kind and others, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so now the real work begins to try and get us to where we were pre-pandemic, where we had the strongest economy the state's ever seen. The biggest issue that we had was that we didn't have enough jobs to fill enough workers to fill the jobs that are available here in the state. So now that the session has started, we have hit the ground running in the state Senate. I know the Assembly's in the same boat. This session, I'm in a leadership position. I serve as the Senate President Pro Temp, and then this is my second session as the Chair of the Senate Health Committee. And so from the Health Committee standpoint, as many of us are aware, there's still a lot of talk about COVID. legislation had passed both the Senate and the Assembly, AB1, a comprehensive COVID relief bill that had a number of provisions in there to provide flexibility for our hospitals, our frontline medical providers, trying to get businesses back on the right track. Unfortunately, that legislation was vetoed for a couple of different reasons that I won't get into, but a lot of those provisions that were in that bill are now coming back as standalone bills. And so Representative Vandermeer and I have authored legislation, AB 148, Senate Bill 202, that would provide some of those flexibilities, like allowing out-of-state healthcare workers to come practice here in the state of Wisconsin, making some various changes to Medicaid and some of the reimbursements, so that way we can hospitals can provide at-home health, some of those functions as well. Hospitals like Marshfield Clinic have been using a federal waiver for about the past year to do at-home health, and it's been very successful. They've been able to service over 500 patients, and the data shows pretty clear that when you can get them out of a hospital setting and administer that care at home, it provides for much better outcomes, and it also is a cost saver to the state. So we're hoping that bill had passed the Assembly, I believe unanimously, wasn't it?
And unanimously in the Health Committee.
Yeah, so unanimously in both the Assembly Health Committee and on the floor. We are going to vote on it today in the Senate Health Committee to hopefully have it ready for the floor this coming week. Some of the other healthcare provisions that we're working on in the Senate Health Committee that aren't COVID related, a number of bills dealing with scope of practice, whether it's dealing with APRNs, there's negotiations going on with our advanced practice nurses along with the hospitals to try and hammer out some language that we can have a compromise bill which will again provide more flexibilities and really focus on a collaborative health team approach that's going to provide better outcomes for patients. One bill in particular that has a local attachment to it is a bill dealing with Krabbe disease. Krabbe is a very rare genetic disease, and there is a family here, Kevin and Judy Cushman, who their son Colin survived for about 8 years but passed away back in 2019. And unfortunately, we don't screen for it here in the state of Wisconsin. And if it's detected early, it is treatable. It's not curable, it is treatable. And this is really about a quality of life and giving those children and those families a chance. There's an example of a gentleman who's now in his early 20s. Unfortunately, the parents, their firstborn child, died of Krabbe after about 1.5 years. And when their son Jeremy, their second born, they knew to screen for it, and they were able to get the stem cell transplant done. And now he's 23, he's wheelchair bound, but he's alive. And so we're hoping that we can get this legislation added and we can make sure that no other families have to deal with that type of tragedy moving forward. So that's my 2 cents for right now.
Thank you very much, Senator. We'll move over to the 7th. So same question, kind of what's going on in your side of the legislative house?
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. Thanks for sharing this time with me today. I kind of gave you a little overview of the committees I'm on right now. I'm going to continue to chair Rural Development Committee, and one of the highlights of the past several sessions is we continue to work on broadband. And I'll try to keep access to broadband. And one of the areas that we are finding is that those last miles, especially in rural broadband access, is going to be accomplished by many of our smaller broadband companies. So last session, for example, through our committee, we passed a bill that would provide a property tax exemption for broadband providers. And that would go a long way, especially for those providers, as we heard from them in continuing to tackle that issue here in Wisconsin. And of course, we're all familiar, of course, with those needs of broadband and how they are intensifying into many areas of our life. You know, it's not only school and business, but it's also telehealth as well. So many of these issues, of course, are all closely related. I will also continue to be Vice Chair of Veterans and Military Affairs, and of course, Jobs and Integrated Employment Committee. I'm Vice Chair of that. And that particular committee, seeks to bring employment opportunities to those Wisconsinites who may have cognitive challenges or physical challenges. So it's very important to bring them into the workplace. And I've been involved with various organizations in my own community that works with those individuals as well. So I'm always excited to do work on that. I will also continue to be on the Health Committee, Consumer Protection, and Mental Health. And when I talk about the Health Committee, as Senator Teston, he talked about quite a bit of the work that we've been doing already. Health Committee in the Assembly has already had 11 hearings. And so there's been a number of very, very significant bills that have been brought forward to the Assembly floor. And one of them was this week relating to pharmacy benefit managers, and that's very important for those Wisconsinites who are taking prescription drugs. And what it does, it brings transparency and pricing to those patients through their pharmacies. So that will be very significant as we move forward as well. Also, we passed through our committee a bill that allows for pharmacy students to be able to administer the COVID vaccine. That's very important, because how do we continue to have those vaccinators available to get this tremendous work done? Last week I also passed through the Assembly, and it was passed by bipartisan unanimous support, and that was our physician assistant bill. And what that did was increase access to physician assistants. We have 2,700 physician assistants here in the state of Wisconsin, and they are very important in augmenting a lot of the health care that our Wisconsinites receive. So what it did, it removed a 1-to-4 ratio of physician to PAs in our healthcare setting, and creating a collaborative agreement. And so therefore we can get more PAs available, increasing access to our patients in Wisconsin. And when we increase access, we all know that part of that equation is having better health outcomes for our Wisconsinites as well. So at any rate, I wanted to, of course, share that with you. And I'll look forward, if you have any questions as we move on here in our discussion, to answer those questions as well. So thank you once again for your interest.
We'll move to the 72nd. Representative Krug, it's all yours.
Thanks. I thought there was a joke coming in between there. So we don't have to move very far with the 72nd. We're here in the beautiful 72nd as always, and I just love every time we're here to be able to look over on the river and just see how amazing things look in this district environmentally. I mean, as the Vice Chair of Environment and Forestry the last 8 years, we have done an amazing amount of work to try to maintain the things that attract people to central Wisconsin. And that, obviously when we talk about broadband and healthcare, those are two things at the top of the list. The environmental beauty and being able to have tourism opportunities here is a huge deal too. So that's one of the things I focus on very heavily in my work in environment and forestry. Speaking of forestry, we absolutely have a lot going on with the Rapids Mill. In case you hear me talk about it a lot, I don't call it Verso anymore. It's not going to be a Verso mill anymore, it's the Rapids Mill. I'd love if we could start changing that conversation and get rid of that nomenclature that we're dealing with Verso. It just isn't what is the future for that area. It's the Rapids Mill. So to update that, I was right before I got elected in 2010. Port Edwards closed in 08-09. We had seen what the consequences of that was. We saw that there was a lot of inaction around that at the time. We saw that there were some ideas that come into that mill potentially that maybe had been realistic and maybe not. Some folks like DMI and some other groups that had some interest in doing bigger production things there that didn't quite happen. So we're very cognizant of trying to pull together a realistic plan, and I think we've done a really good job with the three of us and Representative Shankland and other partners in the Rapids Together Task Force. Our task force met more regularly, obviously, before Christmas when things were very fresh. Right now, we are in the stages where we have been able to work with several groups. There are at least 2 right now who have non-disclosure agreements signed with Verso, to purchase the Rapids Mill. One in particular we've been working with directly, the co-op, the consolidated co-op built out of the timber professionals of Wisconsin and Michigan. And I think that's going to be the most realistic, intriguing idea that comes about. I think that's something that we can get across the finish line. Had a lot of discussions over the last week with those folks, state agencies and more about how do we pull together something that's realistic for financing and to make a purchase a reality. One of the side effects, I think, of the federal government looking to send Wisconsin $5.5 billion in stimulus money is that can help work to replace a lot of the things in our state budget that would otherwise be funded with general purpose revenue. So I think what we're looking to do with a lot of those things is to free up some federal dollars for things that are workforce development related. And I think when it comes to an industry like paper, that was very heavily impacted by COVID because of the non-essentialness of being in the office and printing paper. I think there's no more better industry to be served by COVID-related dollars than paper and paper making. So I think we've got some opportunities there. So I heard, Congressman Kine has done a good job in staying in touch with those folks too. And, we've got Senator Baldwin, Senator Johnson, Congressman Tiffany, ourselves. We've got local stakeholders all involved on both sides, economic development and social issues, to make sure that things like, the United Way and 511 and 211 are always making sure that they're taking care of community needs and that we're staying in tune with them to figure out how we bridge those gaps. So that comprehensive approach, I think, is going to lead us to some successes here in 2021. That's my hope and goal here, at least the first half of the year, that once we get through the state budget, we have a really good picture of where that's going to go. So that's locally. Statewide, I'm also the chair of the Public Benefit Reform Committee again for the third session. One of the things that we're seeing in public benefit reform, especially as we come out of the pandemic and getting people back into the workforce, our benefit situation here in the state of Wisconsin, where we had expanded benefits for food share, medical assistance, rental assistance, you name it, across the board, where there were some expansions and there were some extensions and there's some eligibility tweaks. As we get back to full employment and getting past COVID, a lot of those extensions and a lot of those additional benefits are going to start going away. People are going to start coming back into the workforce. They're going to see their eligibility for benefits decrease and sometimes disappear. So something I've been working on the last couple sessions that we hope to get across the finish line this session is what I call benefit cliff legislation, where if an employee, say, let's use Walmart as an example. If you're working $10 an hour for 20 hours a week at Walmart, and they start ramping up a little bit and say, hey, we can offer you a couple extra dollars an hour or 10 or 12 more hours a week, that takes their income up, but it also hits them to the point where their eligibility for benefits drops off completely. And that's something that's been disincentivizing work for decades in the state of Wisconsin, is that immediate drop. Families don't want that uncertainty, so we've got to figure out a way where we match income to a steadier decline instead of a complete drop-off from benefits. So the benefit cliff legislation would give some income disregard options to say, with your new income for 30 days, we'll drop you this much instead of dropping you off completely, or 30 to 60 days. So by the time you do 30, 60, 90, 120 days, you can wean down to the bottom instead of dropping off the cliff. The other part of that conversation is that some states across the country have also done what they call benefit calculators on their main websites. For DHS, for example, the state of Wisconsin, some people in some states are able to go onto websites and say, okay, this is what I'm making now, this is what I'm eligible for, this is what I'm hoping to be making with this new position, and this is what I would be eligible for. Because one of the big things in our offices that we get phone calls on constantly is, hey, I thought I was eligible for this, and the department told me that my income has disqualified me. Can you guys help? Well, at that point, it's almost too late, because the income changes happen and they're already off the program. But if we can help people anticipate what they're going to be eligible for based on what their income needs are going to be, that helps alleviate a lot of that concern, a lot of that problem, helps them do some planning ahead of time, and helps us all get into a better spot. So we've got some big work ahead of us in public benefit reform to make sure as those additional federal benefits drop off that we can make sure that people are not going to be hurt financially, especially at 3.8% unemployment right now. And it's only going to increase, as far as, our opportunities here in the state as we get past COVID. So, and we're so busy right now in the Assembly and Senate that in the 3 updates that we've had, we haven't even had a chance to even talk about the state budget, right? I mean, that's the big thing that's working the next 3 or 4 months here in the state of Wisconsin, is trying to get all the bills that we wanted to get done during COVID back up on the fast track and across the finish line while working through the state budget process. We'll all have hearings and public input from everybody, in person and on Zoom, and all the input we can possibly get from you is much appreciated, whether it's healthcare, county, state, whoever has some interest and needs in the state budget. It's time to get a hold of us and let us know what your requirements for maintenance of effort would be, I'd say. So with that, I think I'd be happy to open up to questions and to hear what your concerns are.
Actually, I was actually going to give each of you the opportunity to kind of talk about the budget, in highlights.
Perfect.
And maybe just as a background for all of us, just kind of how the process works, maybe some of the timelines.
Yeah.
There'll be disagreements, there'll be compromises, et cetera. I'd like all of your opinions, but Scott, we'll start with you. Kind of what's the process and what do you think is going to happen the next couple of months?
Oh, yeah. So, that's a great segue into what we're expecting to work on. So usually, this is my 6th state budget now, and I'd say that usually the process has been relatively smooth. There have been a couple budgets, even under Scott Walker, where we took some extra time. I mean, we went into September, I think, on one of the state budgets here recently. But typically the state budget process starts when the governor gives us his plan in February, usually. Our goal is to have the Joint Finance Committee start having agency hearings middle of March. They're going to start those next week, it sounds like, where all the departments come and testify in front of the agency and say, this is why the governor asked for the things in his budget. When we start getting past agency hearings, the Joint Finance Committee does their road show, where they do hearings across the state to get input. This year, obviously, there's fewer than usual. I think there's 3 this year, 3 or 4 maybe. Usually there's more, but with COVID it's getting a little tougher, so they'll actually have a Zoom opportunity as well for the first time ever in joint finance history. Beyond that, that's when we start pulling pieces out of the budget and voting on them individually. It's not as though the budget goes through committee in one fell swoop and they say yes or no. Each part of the budget is dissected, discussed, compromised, rejected in some instances, and start from scratch in some areas. But the goal is to kick that thing out of joint finance in time for us to vote on it by the end of the fiscal year, which in Wisconsin is the end of June. Our process here is we try to work on a lot of things locally in the state budget. That's where we had a lot of success with the airport issues and some of the other things we've achieved in the last couple of years. I think this time it's fair to say, going back to the Rapids Mill issue, that's one of those things we're going to try to address in the state budget process. We can't necessarily spend money before the state budget. That's one of the things that we try to accomplish, is get the policy stuff ready for when the budget passes. Besides that, other local issues, obviously 8th Street. We talked about it a few times before. Shane's smiling in the front in case you can't see it. But that's a huge priority as well. We try to make sure that our local priorities are funded while we debate the big statewide type of stuff. So that's kind of the overview of where the budget process starts and where it goes. And last session, the legislature voted on it pretty early, and the governor signed it without very many changes, which would be nice to do again this time, so hopefully.
Senator, comments on the budget?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good overview of the budget process. So to give you kind of the highlights of the budget, I was actually kind of taken aback on the direction that the governor had taken. So if you take a look at his proposed budget, it increases state spending by almost 10%. It's about a $92 billion document. In this document, you have $1 billion in tax increases. You have a number of policy provisions, for instance, like the repeal of Act 10, which has saved Wisconsin taxpayers over $13 billion since its implementation back in 2011. There's a whole host of other policy provisions in there that, quite frankly, the governor had to have known are going to be dead on arrival within the Republican legislature. So our main point right now is trying to make sure that, one, we don't increase taxes on small businesses and families that have struggled over the course of the last year. That we're not going to repeal the manufacturer and egg tax credit, which has been a windfall for our farmers and our manufacturers all across the state that really helped skyrocket Wisconsin to one of the top producing states, not only in the Midwest, but in the entire country. So that we need to make sure that whatever budget we pass is one that lives within our means, because as we have seen, and as Representative Krugen mentioned, Congress cannot print money fast enough apparently. And I know in conversations with our local leaders, you don't know what to do with the money you've already spent from the federal government. Spend money from the federal government that you've received, which is why on that front, we also have legislation that would provide legislative oversight for the roughly $5.5 billion that's coming down from the federal government. So at least we have a seat at the table as to where that money is going to be allocated. But as Scott mentioned, some of the local projects within the budget, clearly there's an avenue and an opportunity to work with the Rapids Mill and provide some sort of state incentive package for the co-op or another interested buyer. And so that's what our hope is moving forward, that we can work with WEDC, the BCPL, to hopefully find that incentive, because it's there. We just need to thread the needle, and hopefully we can get that accomplished. But here's my prediction, and I hope I'm wrong, is that we are going to do our due diligence through the Joint Finance Committee. We will pass a budget hopefully by June 30th, and hopefully the governor doesn't veto the entire budget. We'll see. Because there was talk in the last budget that we had sent him. I know there were some who were bending his ear to veto the budget. Thankfully, he didn't. He signed what I believe was a very strong and good budget. But I could foresee a scenario where he would veto whatever we sent him. And then I know a lot of people are asking, well, then what happens? Well, the good news is, unlike the federal government, if for some reason that we reach that crossroads, services aren't going to shut off, the lights aren't going to shut off, and state government will just operate under the current base budget, which, not the end of the world, but hopefully that won't happen. And so that's why we're hopeful through the work of the Joint Finance Committee. They're going to do their due diligence. The way it works for members who are on the Joint Finance Committee, for myself and Representative Vandermeer and Krug, we have what are called our budget buddies that we essentially use to get our priorities incorporated in the state budget. So if there are projects, whether it's transportation, things of that nature, let us know. I know I've been talking to a couple of the cabinet secretaries, like DOT Secretary Designee Thompson, on some of those very issues. A Street, talked to him directly about that, dealing with some of the flooding issues down in the southern part of my district in Adams and Washera County and southern Wood County. And so just let us know, and what you like, what you don't like, what you'd see changed or tweaked, because we can take that back to our colleagues on the Joint Finance Committee, and so that way they know what the pulse is around the state.
Very good, thank you. Both of my colleagues did such a fine job of describing the process. I'll just give you a couple examples of the budget motions that I will be placing with my budget buddy, as we call them, our member of Joint Finance. And I'm also working with Senator Teston on these as well. And those are grants for agriculture research. And some are through UW-Cals down in Madison and works with the extension. This is especially vital for cranberry dairy and our crop industry. And so we're very optimistic about those as well. We worked on those last session. We brought them up as bills, for example, and then COVID came and it didn't get through the Senate, got through the Assembly, and so we will present them again as budget motions through the budget process. So that's the type of thing that we are working on. Also for me, I was a member of the Speaker's Task Force on Suicide Prevention in 2019, and I had proposed a grant program for small or local county mental health organizations. So I will be presenting that again, and I will do that through the budget process. And this is important. It helps to augment programming through especially our rural areas due to the shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists in those areas. So it's another way that those public health organizations, for example, can reach out to those who are dealing with mental health issues. And that's certainly something that we have seen an increase in during the pandemic. So I just want to bring we started at a broad level and bring it down to a more specific one once again. But I will also be reaching out to my local officials, making sure that they have any specific interests that they need me to be aware of. And I know my other colleagues will be doing that as well. So once again, if you have any ideas or questions, please reach out to my office. And I want to add one other item as well. Senator Tustin talked about taxes, and so did Representative Krug. And I think it's very important for a group like us to think about our taxing structure and how it relates to the individuals here in Wisconsin, those hardworking families in our state. And we talked about employment rates, how we are looking for skilled people who are willing to come to work and come to Wisconsin. And I think having an appropriate tax structure is one of the keys to attracting those people to our wonderful state. So, you know, it's not just the dollars and cents for the folks here now, but how do we continue to entice folks to at least take a look at Wisconsin and come on over and be a good Wisconsinite in the future. So thank you.
I had to chuckle because the minute you said taxes, both of those guys went like this. Their ears perked up, because I know that's a word that sometimes they don't like to hear. Agriculture is obviously huge in our area, and certainly in the 70th, 72nd, and the 24th Senate District. Would any of you like to comment on anything you see that will impact agriculture, both negatively and positively, hopefully, in the next year? Sure, Senator.
Yeah, so I kind of touched on a little bit in the budget overview, and first and foremost, making sure we don't repeal the manufacturer and ag tax credit. That's probably going to be the top priority within the legislature, is making sure that that stays in place. And Nancy also touched on it too. We've got legislation that's out there that will provide dollars for our cranberry marketing board as well as our potato and vegetable marketing board. Because we saw in the last budget, we had prioritized about a $7 million earmark for the Dairy Innovation Hub. And the work that they're doing through that is just remarkable. I mean, we had a public hearing in the Senate Ag Committee not too long ago, and they came in to give us an update on some of the new products, some of the markets that they're trying to reach. They've developed a cheese that will help with hypertension. I mean, all of us, our jaws are kind of on the ground, and so we're trying to take that same approach with some of our other commodities here in the state and our specialty markets like cranberries and potatoes, because we are the #1 producer of cranberries in the country. We are the 3rd in potato and vegetables, and so they have a huge economic impact, not just to this area, but to the state, and we want to make sure that we're providing any and all options for them to expand their markets. Some other areas that we want to address, this has been a common theme, you know, in committee hearings, where if you've seen this bill before, it's because you have. It was going to get through last session, but again, COVID, and we are sidetracked. But a legislation that I've authored with State Representative Lauren Oldenburg that would make some modifications to the Farmland Preservation tax credit. This is a tax credit that has been on the books going back to the 70s and has only had 3 major changes since its inception. And so after receiving feedback from farmers enrolled in the program, we've seen a decline in usership. And so at the same time, we've also seen a decline in our farmland here in the state. And what this Farmland Preservation tax credit does is actually a good conservation metric, because it helps farmers, helps with runoff, helps with clean water, and obviously here in the Central Sands that is a big issue. And on that front as well, and you've heard me talk about this not only at our last legislative breakfast, but through the campaign, the work that was done through the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality. There were about 13 bills that had passed the Assembly, and I hate to keep saying this, but didn't make it through the Senate because of COVID.
Just remember, he keeps saying it didn't pass in the Senate.
That legislation is being reintroduced, and I'm hoping that we can get those through, because we had a lot of bills in there that were going to be beneficial for our ag community, our partners in agriculture. Things like more grant dollars for the producer-led watershed grants, which I believe have been the best investment, biggest bang for our buck as it relates to runoff, doing best practices. You need only to contact John Aaron, who leads up the farmers of Mill Creek. We've got others that are popping up, and so it's great to see providing more grant dollars for our county conservationists. Nancy touched on the UW-Cal specialists, providing more funds for them. So First and foremost, we just want to make sure that we keep doing what we can to support our farmers here in the state, because it is almost a $90 billion economic driver here in the state. And when you talk about the other jobs that go along with it, the support jobs, the implementation, everything else, it is just, we need to make sure we're supporting our farmers.
Anyone else?
Sure, thanks. And, you know, one of the things that gets left out of the agriculture conversation sometimes is the impact that forestry has in the state of Wisconsin. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. But, you know, where we've got traditional dairy and other produce farming that is about $90 billion in the state of Wisconsin, forestry and paper products is $88 billion industry. And those industries, they're all centralized in our districts, right? I mean, we've got, like Pat mentioned, cranberries and potatoes, but we're also world leaders on green beans, carrots, snap peas, even starting now with kidney beans. And you name it, we grow it. I mean, that's one of the great things here too, is that we've got, you know, the breadbasket of Wisconsin between the three of our areas that we represent. And we've had such a great relationship with the farmers that we represent over the years that they understand now, finally, since with the creation of the producer-led watershed grants back in 2013, that farming does have an impact on, you know, the rest of what we do in the state of Wisconsin. So my district, as well as everybody else's, is very tourism related, very, you know, recreational related, like I started off with. So it's very important that we continue that work that we started with the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality that I was on, and Patrick was, he fought very hard to be one of the first state senators on a Speaker's Task Force. That's how dedicated we've been to that project and making sure these bills get across the finish line. Not only has it made a huge impact on changing ideas within farming towards conservation, but it's also led to some direct impacts and results over the last 10 years. You know, if you've ever been out on Lake Petenwell in the middle of August, early September, after it's been 80, 85 degrees for a stretch of time, I'd say you can get out a little further on Lake Petenwell because you can walk on the green sometimes. That's changing, right? So we finally created some site-specific rules for discharges related to non-point source phosphorus into our lakes and rivers and streams that farmers have gotten behind into trading credits, basically, for their phosphorus inputs to factory phosphorus inputs. So non-point and point source working together to reduce those loads of inputs into our bodies of water benefit everybody. So, I mean, that's where agriculture comes in. Is the understanding on their part that while they're a huge part of our economy and a very valued partner, that they understand the value of the partnership all around. And I think we've done a good job in leading them into that conversation in the last 10 years. Even if bills don't pass, the conversations we have about it in the legislature definitely changed hearts and minds. So I think we're doing a great job on those avenues too.
Thank you. You know, many of you know that I'm part of a family dairy farm operation, and I really appreciate the work that we are able to do in the assembly to strengthen our dairy farmers here in our state. And it's certainly an industry, as we said, it's now $104 billion economic impact as of late, and it's certainly an industry that we want to continue to keep strong in agriculture. And you know, both of you had mentioned the Farmland Preservation. I'm on agriculture. I had the opportunity to hear that bill as it was presented. And I think it's a very well-balanced bill because we're talking about incentivizing farmers to participate in farmland preservation by doing certain conservation practices. And you know, I just want to leave you with a little thought. Maybe kind of think about this as you see farmers out in their fields this spring. To develop 1 inch of topsoil, it takes 100 years. That's how precious this resource is, and that really is the link as to why farmland preservation, one of them, is why it is so very important. Because if we have that strong topsoil, for example, we don't have to use as many nutrients and chemicals, etc. So it's just a great balance of putting all of these factors together and helping agriculture and helping that industry to stay strong and grow into the future. So thank you.
Thank you. I caught a news item yesterday obviously in COVID-related world, things just kind of fell off the table, and it had to do with people filing for unemployment benefits. The statistic is about 1% of the calls were answered over about a 1-year time frame. And I did see where there's the possibility, and it also kind of talks about broadband, that they are trying to establish a 24/7 system where you can literally, using the internet, you can file for unemployment. They hope to have it fully operational sometime in the fall, but it's going to include a huge amount of money. I think there's federal dollars available to upgrade what they're calling an antiquated system to get those people help. I'm just wondering, is that anything that's on your radar, or have you heard that, or is there just an update on that? It kind of relates to broadband.
This has been one of the sore spots between the legislature and the administration is, how throughout government action we were not ready or were not prepared to answer the other side of the coin, right? We told people, listen, you gotta stay home, you can't go to work. But on the flip side of the coin, we said you can't get your unemployment either. I mean, it was bonkers. I mean, I've never seen so many phone calls and emails into our offices on any issue in my 10 years, hands down. And these were people that were calling us who went flat broke, who lost their apartments or lost their homes or had mortgage issues, thank God we had some moratoriums on electric and water shutoffs not happening. Eviction moratoriums came later. But there are people, literally still, 1 year later, who are in what I call adjudication hell, right? Their claim was finally answered because we got to the point where we talked to the administration of using better technology on their end. They have the ability to do so the entire time. So the administration took a chance, and 9 months into this, after firing the head of the department, 9 months into this, they finally had an interaction with Google and said, hey, is there some interface technology that Google can assist the state of Wisconsin with to clear out some of these claims? And lo and behold, what happened when technology became available and Google said, yes, we can come in, claims started to get processed. But up until that point, when Craig says, the statistic was about 1% of the calls got answered, it was a little bit less than 1%. And even if the system is antiquated, how do you not answer the phone and give people the time of day to at least say, I hear your concerns, we're doing the best we can? It does not take rocket scientists to figure out how to answer those calls when people are desperate for answers and solutions. We did that in our legislative offices. We hounded DWD on thousands of cases, and those cases were resolved because we were able to get through to DWD as legislators. That lasted for about 3 months, right? And then DWD came to us as state legislators and said, you know what? Don't call us anymore, we're busy. Here's an email form that you as legislators can send to us for your constituents to resolve those problems. But we're not going to talk to you directly about it. It's infuriating. And it still is to this day, because like I had mentioned, the adjudication hell that is going on for thousands of people in the state of Wisconsin yet, that's absolutely ridiculous. So I'm a little worked up about unemployment because, especially in my district, I've got Adams County, right? It's the third poorest county in the state. And to have the issues of Adams County residents not even being answered by the state of Wisconsin to say, okay, this is a problem, up until 9 months into the problem, it's been insane. To give DWD some credit, though, when the Rapids Mill issue started popping its head up, we included DWD into our task force. We told DWD we're about to see this influx of claims. We don't want to see the same thing happen to these claims that is happening statewide in every other claim. So DWD finally took a chance in their process to say, you know what, let's have a dedicated team to deal with these issues. So I know it's possible. I know that manpower can overcome any system issues that exist because it happened with the Rapids Mill situation. So as we update the system as we need to and work with our partners at Deloitte, a technology company that we use all the time, and Google to develop a better interface, most of the claims right now already are dealt with on the internet, right? You can go on DWD, you can file your unemployment for the most part. Some people still depend on that telephone interaction though. And we have to figure out a way to maintain that. It's not the processing of the system, it's the people to input the information in. So we gave flexibilities as much as we can for people power. Those all exist. It's all in the hands of the administration right now, but we're going to play our role and make sure that we beef up everything as best as we can.
Scott covered that pretty well, but this is an issue that also just makes my blood absolutely boil. Excuse me. As far too often we hear that what we're dealing with are from the direct impacts of COVID-19. And that's one area that I will always push back against. There is no question there have been direct impacts caused by the virus, but much of the woes that have been caused by government reaction to the pandemic. And the unemployment crisis is a prime example. So Wisconsin was one of the few states in the nation that back in April, we passed an omnibus bill to deal with COVID relief, where after Congress had passed the CARES Act, the first one, we came in, passed legislation, bipartisan. I think there were only 2 no votes in the entire legislature that essentially gave the governor broad discretion to take nearly $2 billion from federal money to dole out throughout his administration. So at that time, we were seeing peak cases and unemployment numbers, and as Scott mentioned, all of our offices, every legislative office was flooded with constituents who couldn't get through, get a hold of anyone at DWD. Within Act 186, which was our omnibus COVID relief bill, we gave broad discretion to the administration to transfer state employees to various agencies. It took them 2.5 months to start beefing up DWD. And then what they did with their call centers was they contracted with call centers outside of the state, which a number of us raised red flags immediately saying, okay, you're going to hire individuals who don't know our UI process, who don't even reside in the state of Wisconsin, to take calls to then pass on to DWD. And the call centers were only open from, 7:30 until about 3:30. And it wasn't until legislators started pushing back that they expanded the call hours by 2 hours. So you had people waiting for hours on end, not just to get a hold of someone, but also waiting for their unemployment insurance upwards of 33 weeks. I mean, people's lives were absolutely ruined, and there was no sense of urgency within the department. So I saw the news story today too, that they are going to do the 24-hour call centers, which is great. It's too little too late, which is why we passed legislation early on to give more resources to the department, even though we kept saying all along, you have the ability to do this internally as is. So that's been a huge point of contention between the administration and the legislature, that we keep telling the governor that you have the ability to make these changes in-house. But they keep coming back to us and saying, no, you guys need to pass a law. So we did. It was a bipartisan bill. I'm hopeful that the department is going to get back on the right track. And as Scott mentioned, give credit where credit is due. I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with the new DWD Secretary Designee, and I've been so far impressed with the approach that she's been taking. And that's one of the things that I pointed to her, is that there needs to be more of a customer service attitude from the department. When people are calling because they've been waiting weeks on end and they keep getting, well, we'll see where you're at. There was an audit that was conducted shortly after the peak crisis in unemployment claims. In that audit, when we had the highest number of claimants here in the state, there were roughly almost 40 million calls? 40 million calls over a 2.5 month period in the DWD. We're a state of 5.5 million. For an agency to receive 40 million calls, of which less than 0.5% got through to someone, that is a huge problem. That hopefully we will never find ourselves in that position again. I'm hoping, as Scott mentioned, with the partnership with Google, we are going to have a more user-friendly interface for these individuals. But more importantly, it has to be a customer service-centric agency moving forward. And that's been my charge to the Secretary. She has been receptive to that. I do believe that is the approach that they are taking. And I'm hopeful that they can turn this around.
I don't know if you had any comments?
No, you did.
Okay.
Great comments.
That caused a reaction.
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry. Checking my blood pressure now.
Yeah, me too.
You got any of that cheese?
Well, we have folks from Aspirus right there. They can help you if you need anything. As we kind of conclude this portion, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit.
Uh-oh.
If a year from now, or let's say at the end of end of this year or, whenever a time frame, if there was one bill or a group of bills that pass and are signed into law, what would you be the most proud of? I mean, I'll start with you, Nancy. Anything that's kind of in the pipeline, or just you could say to yourself, "Oh, it's great, finally got that done."
That's a hard question.
Yep, sure is.
Because usually, I shouldn't say usually, every one of my bills are important. And the reason is, they touch someone's lives. And the reason why I became interested in being a representative and working for all of you was the fact that we could change lives and reach out to people. So I guess I'd have to prioritize any of my bills that deal with health, access to health. That is going to touch a wide portion, wide swath of our population. And it makes their lives better. It makes an ease of employment easier for them, their quality of life in so many different ways. And then I follow that up with mental health. I think that mental health is so closely intertwined with our physical health that it should be considered actually one area of healthcare, of course, now. And then, of course, economic development. That's the driver. That's the driver that's going to want people to come to Wisconsin. I touched on that briefly. So, and included in economic development is a lot of the areas we talked about. Broadband, agriculture. And when I talk about economic development, it's also how do we get private funding into some of our at-risk communities. I've worked on areas like that as well. So when I look at it, when we kind of use a term from the healthcare industry, is I guess I would triage my areas of policy. So I look forward to working on so many things and bringing those good things to the Wisconsinites I work for. Thank you.
Well, if there was one bill that if I could have it written up, drafted today, and onto the governor's desk, it would be to ensure that every school here in the state of Wisconsin is open 5 days a week in person. And I want to give a lot of credit to Superintendent Craig Bourne here in the Rapid School District for his leadership, working with our partners over at Riverview and the Wood County Health Department to develop a plan to do just that. And I think it's a great example. I know the other school districts here in Wood County have taken that lead as well, because unfortunately there are some districts here in the state of Wisconsin that if they had their way, they would be shut down forever. They're where, for various different reasons and different factors, some political, some not, that they just don't want to come back at all. And unfortunately for a number of our kids here in the state of Wisconsin, the virtual learning is not working. For some it is, they're able to manage, but for many it's not. And so we can't really open up our economy fully until we can have kids back in the classroom, because far too many moms and dads are stuck at home making sure that their students are being able to log on, have access to good internet, so they're not falling behind. And my fear is the longer that this goes on, the longer that we don't have kids in the classroom, it's going to have ripple effects where we're not going to have a workforce that's ready for the future. It's going to have impacts in our UW system. In fact, back in the end of January, I was out at Tommy Thompson's residence, and we had a conversation just on broad discussions of the UW system, the state of the state, where things are at. And I asked them, how's the UW system going to grapple with the fact now we're almost on a full year and a half of this kind of hybrid model of in-person versus virtual? And it's clear that there are going to be a number of students and an increase of students who aren't ready for college. And the question I pose to them is then, how do you deal with that? Because that poses a unique problem where do you have to drop the bar for admissions or the requirements for admissions so you don't have a drop in enrollment, which would then ruin the sterling reputation of the UW system? Or are you guys going to have to be more proactive in working with our partners in our K-12 education system to ensure that they're ready for college? And thankfully they're up to that task, but that is going to be a huge issue moving forward. I know a number of my colleagues have really been trying to push this as well, and that's why we need to get kids back in the classroom so we can really open things back up and make sure that our kids aren't falling behind, so we don't have a lost generation of activity here in the state.
So in my 10 plus years now, I always call it my book of stuff, right? Bills that I've written that I want to try to get done. My goal is that retirement happens at the point when the book of stuff starts going like this, But unfortunately, you learn in the legislature that the stuff always goes like this, and this is just one of those things that's never going to change.
Good, you're staying.
Well, I didn't say that yet either, so I didn't say staying or going, so don't quote me on anything. One of the challenges that we have in legislation, obviously, is it takes more than one session to get a good bill done. It takes a lot of time to compromise, it takes a lot of time to get some good stuff done. I'm super proud of some of the bills that have gotten done, obviously, already. You know, financial literacy was a big one where we mandated financial literacy throughout the curriculums for students all over the state of Wisconsin. That was huge. You know, I think looking forward, the bills that I want to see done, instead of just the, you know, if we talk the bigger ideas, you know, as healthcare and broadband and things like that, I'm going to dig down a little bit more. And I would say one bill that I really want to get done this session is my bill for the firefighters memorial in Wisconsin Rapids. Put them back on the tax checkoff to make sure it's funded for perpetuity. Every year, Senator Teston and I, we go to the final bell ceremony, and it's solemn, it's heartbreaking. It reminds us how much we depend on our first responders in the state of Wisconsin, and how much we value what they do for us every day. To have that memorial here in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, you know, that Tommy Thompson himself had proclaimed when it was passed back in the late 80s, early 90s, that it would be here forever. I think it's incumbent on us this session, Senator Teston and I are working on the bill this session, to ensure that future, to make sure that memorial stays here in perpetuity. So that's kind of my, you know, fourth level type of bill when you talk about some of the smaller type things instead of the statewide stuff. You know, at the end, I think the biggest thing that I could ever say that I could accomplish would be able to see the Speaker's Task Force on Water Quality bills all get passed, all 13 of them. It has been tens of thousands of hours working towards these goals of finding balance between agriculture and conservation. To see those bills, they're not silver bullets. They're not going to solve a problem on their own. But to see those 13 bills pass as a really good start on everybody being at the table and that conversation finally being concluded into legislation, that would be in conclusion of some yeoman's work, and I think that's something that will benefit Central Wisconsin throughout the rest of my lifetime. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you very much. We do have a couple minutes. Does anyone have a quick question for any
Senator
of our...
Teston.
Oh, no, for... Okay, I guess, Angel, anything that's coming in from our virtual world in terms of a question? I don't believe so, but just wanted to give you a chance.
No, the online group just wants to thank everyone for coming in and speaking on the issues impacting our community. And then someone did note that Ms. Kusa has also been in person as well.
Yep.
And Patrick, please don't let your blood boil because we need you healthy during these times. So keep that in mind. And I know the senator does have to leave.
Actually, it got moved, so.
Oh, it got moved. Okay, great. Well, then I'm going to ask a question. So we talked a little bit about Verso and, again, the Wisconsin Rapids Mill and what's going there. Are there other efforts beyond just the actual, you know, negotiations and things like that happening? Are there any other funding being looked at for the surrounding community? Are there any other projects in place that are happening that are support the development of the community that you are aware of?
So Shane's sitting right in the front here, why don't you? There's an amazing amount of work, and one of the reasons we kind of tailed off at some of the task force work in particular, where it's you know, fully consumable for folks over the mid-state recordings with Microsoft Teams, is a lot of that stuff has gotten to the point where it's very sensitive. And I think the point when you get to negotiations being as sensitive as they are means that reality is about to change. And that's a great thing. I think beyond the Rapids Mill itself, there is a big push, you know, not only from the timber professionals and other wood marketing folks to not only, you know, secure the future of the Rapids Mill itself, but the training facility at UWSP, the mill at Park Falls, paper making in the state of Wisconsin as a whole. We see ND still going through expansion. We see Domtar still looking for new products. We've got grander ideas as the paper caucus moves forward beyond just the Rapids Mill's future into paper's future as a whole. But understanding that over the last 10 years, we've done a really good job in diversifying our economy to the point where I don't want to say there wasn't an impact from those 1,000 jobs being shuttered at the Rapids Mill, but when Port Edwards closed, it hurt a heck of a lot more at this point than the Rapids Mill shuttering. And that's because our economy is stronger than it's been in the past. We've got other opportunities. We've got Metallico. We've got the North American headquarters of Ocean Spray. We've got so many other things going as we looked at information from WEDC that whereas 60% of the jobs in Wood County used to be paper related, even before the impact of the Rapids Mill closure, it was 35% of our jobs were paper and paper service related. So the diversification of our economy as a whole is something that we've got to keep and maintain in our idea conversations moving forward, that I don't think those conversations happened a whole lot in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because we never thought this would ever happen, right? We always thought we can put all our eggs in one basket, we're going to be fine into the future. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned as legislators the last few years for all of us, is that the future is never certain, and especially now after COVID, we don't know what's going to be here in the next day or not. Whereas when I started, things would change every couple of months. Things are literally changing every week, and things and huge changes every week as far as technology and how the world approaches different things. We've got to stay a lot more proactive in the legislature as opposed to reactive. So that's where we're trying to make sure we do a lot of those things ahead of the game instead of behind the 8 ball.
Thank you very much. Let's give our elected officials a round of applause and thank them. Thank them for joining us, both online and also in person here, and as the beautiful sun is out there. But also thank them for taking on the challenge of being an elected official. Many of you in this room are elected officials. You know the challenge. The phone rings constantly. The emails constantly come in. And you kind of move things almost like a football team where you're moving by inches and not yards sometimes. So again, I want to personally thank you for being here. Thank you very much. At this point, we also want to open it up. Is there anyone that in the audience that is running for office? You do know there's an election coming up here pretty quick. And if that is the case, if we have anyone, we will give them the opportunity to address the members here and then also virtually. Okay. I would also then, if Craig Bornan, or Craig, would you like to come and just speak a little bit about your item that's coming up, obviously April 6th as well. We'll give you a chance to address the group. You can come here if you'd like, and they can see you at home.
Do whatever you tell me.
Actually, we follow Angel, remember. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to Mayor Blazer and Chair Plimmel for yielding their time to me. So it's now going to be me the remainder of the time to talk. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll be uncharacteristically brief because what you have on your table is a flyer regarding the Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools upcoming 2 referenda questions that will appear on the April 6th ballot. Real quick, question 1 is a levy override question, $2 million a year for 5 years, and it will be dollars dedicated towards curriculum and technology updates over time. And so some of those dollars will come out of, if it is approved, some of those dollars still continue to come out of Fund 10, but of course that additional need that is offered by the $2 million levy override is legitimately why that question's being asked. For those that aren't aware, when we're talking curriculum and technology, we're talking about multifaceted. So that's more than just textbooks and workbooks, although that's part of it, but it's also computers, infrastructure, seat licenses for kids to get engaged in virtual and online curriculum and so forth and so on. Secondly is a $34 million bond issue question that is tied up to multiple projects all incorporated into the one question. Some of the commentary that we've heard from the public is, why are you only asking 2 questions? Well, why are you asking 2 questions in the first place? And then why only 2? And the answer to that question, it lies in state statute. So we can only ask 2 questions max per election cycle. and a levy override by law has to be separate from a bond issue question. So that's why there's two. Back in the old days, you would see a bond issue question, multiple bond issue questions, pardon me, that would say something like, shall the school district be able to borrow $12 million for secured entrances, yes or no? Shall they be able to borrow $17 million to renovate Lincoln High School, yes or no? And you'd see those on the same ballot, right? And in a lot of cases, you get the yes boxes checked, or you get, flavor of the day. Some would pass and some wouldn't. We can no longer do that. So as I mentioned, you can only do two, which is why that $34 million bond issue is all rolled into one. Entailed in that, and what's outlined in that flyer to a degree, is a portion of that, about $12 million, is secured entrances in all the schools. For those of you that aren't aware, what that means is, in some cases, it's a minor modification, a renovation, just changing doorways and adding doorways and changing configurations. In other cases, it's an addition because you need to relocate the office. So in a general sense, I think the biggest one to point to would be Lincoln High School, which is an easy example. Many people go there. You walk in the front door, you go to the left, you have immediate access to anywhere in the building that's in the instructional portion. You look to the right and you're immediately into the commons. Clearly it's secure because we're locked and you got a buzz to get in, but once you're in, you have access to anywhere in the building. So the secured entrance piece, it diverts folks. So once you're in, the only place you can go is to your left or to your right to get into the school office. Then you're checked in, and then you have access to the rest of the building. So that's, in a general sense, what the secured entrances mean. All of this information is available on our district website, wrps.org. There is a page dedicated to the referenda, so you can, learn about all those things, as well as there was 3 public information sessions that were live streamed and are on our WRPS YouTube channel. And so if you really want to, get to sleep quick, you can watch that. But if you do want to hear all of the details, clearly that is available for you there. Another portion of that renovation, or that $34 million, is around $17-ish million to renovate other aspects of Lincoln High School. So as I mentioned, it's a relocation of the office to the front of the building, and then to the right of that, so on the left side, new offices. To the right of that would be a relocated library and media center and student resource center. The question would be, why are you doing that? And the answer lies in what we're doing on the second floor, which is the renovation of the science classrooms that are up there. For those of you that are Wisconsin Rapids residents that have been here for your life and have a family that's been around for quite some time, you realize that Lincoln High School is the new Lincoln High School. However, it was built in 1979. So we're talking about classrooms that are 42 years old. And science in particular, the infrastructure, the engagement around science curriculum is not the same as it was in 1979. It is now in 2021. So that's the rationale there. And then lastly, a portion of that is the addition of a gym out at Think Academy. Think Academy is in fact Rudolph Elementary. It's a community elementary school. There's some confusion on that topic, or there was at least in the front end. We've worked to try to get the word out on what Rudolph Elementary Think Academy actually is. It's called Think Academy because several years ago the district engaged a process to add multiple charter schools at the time. So Meade was a charter, Think Academy was a charter, and then there was 1 or 2 others as well. But anyway, those charter contracts have lapsed, and the name at Think Academy has remained, right? But it is Rudolph Elementary, and currently it serves kids from the Rudolph and Vesper area. There's about 300 students out there, and that is about that building's capacity. We are currently at 7 elementary schools that we operate. They are all at or near capacity. We do not anticipate a significant change in student count, pupil count, either up or down in the foreseeable future. Keep in mind, if you do lose 100 kids or so as a result of whatever the impact might be, the Verso closure, the pandemic, you name it, that's not isolated in one building. Right? So it's not as though that if you lose that number of kids, that would reduce our need for the space that we have. So there is not any additional school closures on the horizon, so I'll point to that. Why would you need a gym out at Rudolph? The current space that they use, and this is laid out quite well on a floor plan, so each of the buildings, how they're impacted through this bond issue referenda is on the district website and via the PowerPoint that I've done in the community presentations. Is that Rudolph has a gymnacafenatorium. So it's the gym, it's the cafeteria, and then they use it as a gathering place when they're doing, a couple of grade levels or a whole school kind of get together. Not so much during the pandemic, of course, but in a general sense. The size of that is not even a full-size gym currently. So it's undersized for the space and the use. The addition of the gym costs roughly $4.7 million, so it's a full-size gym addition with some limited seating for about 200, just a bleacher pull-out, get some storage spaces and a couple of updates to bathrooms, which would leave the cafeteria for cafeteria purposes, the gym for gym purposes, and then the other impact of having a full-size gym out there would be for community use, ball practice, wrestling practice, whatever the case may be. So that in general encapsulates everything. And then on the last page of that flyer, and then I'm done, I promise, is the projected tax impact, because we like talking taxes.
Yeah.
And we're in a, I pay them too, just so you know. I mean, there is that aspect. But anyway, the point is that our projections based on your school portion of the tax levy is that if both of these questions are approved, it would not impact our local school tax levy. And the reason being is that there is debt that's been defeased by the district, so that's fallen off the tax rolls. And this is somewhat replacing that. And you'll see it kind of settle out at 9.73. That is, I'm going to say, a high estimate. However, as you heard, we're in the process of developing a biennial budget. What they do on the biennial budget side does have an impact to taxes, but what we did in our cast forward model is maintain what we've got. So to get our 9.73, both the levy override and the bond issue question would pass. We would levy appropriately for that, and we have basically stagnant state aid, and we predicted like a 2%, which is a low increase in equalized property value, to get us to, and actually it'll shake out actually 9.54, but we kept the 9.73, so we'll technically and most likely come in under that. I also ran a catastrophic budget, which it doesn't sound like we're going to have a catastrophic budget, but I think it makes sense to do so. And in that scenario, we ran a 2% decrease in equalized property values. I don't anticipate that happening, but a 2% decrease, as well as a $1 million reduction in state aid. I'm not giving these guys any ideas to reduce our state aid, but if we did lose $1 million in state aid, so again, a 2% equalized value reduction and a $1 million reduction in state aid, and that would drive the mill rate to 10-ish in that ballpark. So you can see historically, even in a catastrophic sense, we're not really going to create or exacerbate local tax-based issues as far as the school referenda are concerned. So I appreciate your time. That's pretty much the long and short of it. But as I indicated, there's tons of information out there, and my contact information is on that flyer too. So feel free to reach out with questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to higher education. Update on Mid-State Technical College as she runs up here.
Not here, this is one.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the tax part, so keep going.
No taxes. It's kind of like open mic, right? Gosh, I'm Bobby from Mid-State Technical College. I wanted to share with you all, and legislators, we've talked with you about this, and thank you for your consideration on it. And it's about a legislative issue from the technical college system that's really important to access and opportunities for some of our students. And the issue really is, what we're asking legislation to do is take a look at statute 3631. 3631 is a statute that says the following. It says that technical colleges in Wisconsin are not able to offer liberal arts and liberal science 2-year degrees. This was very purposeful. This statute came to be about 50 years ago, and really with good intent. And the intent was that we could use our UW partner colleges to be able to offer those associates of science and associates of art degrees. So there was no need for the technical college to do that. But 50 years later, we're at a very different point in time, where when we start looking at it, access, affordability, all of those types of issues, the technical college system does offer those courses. So for example, in our nursing program, we offer those general education courses. In our business program, we offer those general education courses. We just can't bundle them together and offer that 2-year degree that would provide a pathway for those students to get a 4-year degree. So what happens? Here's the reality for Mid-State. There are 5 colleges of the 16 that are able to offer these 2-year degrees. But Mid-State, because our district does have two UW 2-year colleges, we have not been able to do that. So here's the reality of the boots on the ground of what's happening. We have 105 students right now that are in the 2-year, in a 2-year program. They want a liberal arts degree. They're going to go somewhere else. We can start them. These are our kids. They're our neighbors' kids. We can start them in the program, but we can't finish them. So guess where they go? they're going to Nicolay, they're going to Rhinelander, they're finishing their degree there. Then we lose them. We lose them as our potential workforce because they're no longer in our system. What we'd like to be able to do is finish them here. We see, Mid-State sees our relationship with UW-Stevens Point, which is really good. We share dorms with them. We try to get as many of our students that are interested in that four-year pathway right to them. They can get their master's there, they can get even their doctorate there at this point. This is the partnership that we need, but we need to be able to get some of those students that can't afford the UW system right now on the right pathway. You talked a little bit about Adams County. We also cover Adams County. Adams County has a 25% post-high school attainment rate. In other words, only 75% of their folks don't go on because they don't really have access and they can't get to one of these two-year colleges. We want to be able to get them, those students, on a pathway, put those general ed courses through dual credit in their high school and be able to serve them better so we can get them on the pathway. We know that by 2027, 60% of our workforce has to have a post-secondary credential. What's going to happen in Adams County? We're at 25%. How do we get from 25 to 60 in just a couple of years? We know we have to start somewhere, and this is somewhere where we can start. Mid-State would like to be to, for example, UW-Stevens Point, what Madison College is to UW-Madison. And you know what that is? That's their largest feeder program. So we have talked to our legislators, they're considering it. We're looking for support. If anyone is able to maybe help me by writing a support letter, please see me afterwards. We really want to take this to the next level. What was good 50 years ago isn't good for us today. And I think we've shown that our partnerships with the UW system is good, and it's about access and affordability. And those students that can't get to one of those UW campuses, but we are their local college, they can finish with us. So that's what I have to say. Are there any questions about this topic? Because I can certainly answer any questions at this time.
Good job.
Good job.
No? Back to you.
Mayor Shane Blazer, anything from the city perspective? Aquatic centers open this morning or anything? You're going to go out there or anything?
Can Rome come to the aquatics this year?
Yes.
Oh, good, all right.
Oh,
Thank you.
sure.
Did I mention East Street at all?
I think I've heard a little, yeah.
Yes, every time I see them, I take every opportunity to reach out about reconstruction of A Street. It's long overdue, and so I'm glad every time you see me, you're thinking A Street. Can we talk railroads next? That's high on my list too, because I think we probably weekly take phone calls about the railroad and how it's deliberate, just cutting off our community. Coming up next, I disagree with Representative Kind. We don't have spring season, we're in orange cone season. So we're starting spring construction. If you go up on our website, we have a new icon for road closures and updates on construction. Working with Alderman Veneman and the rest of the council, we're looking to address special assessments in the community. It's a long overdue, antiquated concept of trying to raise money for road construction. So we're looking at, hopefully the next couple of months, we'll have a couple plans there. Aquatics, Craig, Park and Rec, I think it was Monday. We voted to have no geo restrictions, opening June 7th we had about 450 capacity last year, and we're going to raise it to 600 this year. Kind of just gauge more on the experience, because we're thinking 822 with the capacity is going to be quite crowded. So we're going to go up to 600, kind of see how that is, and then see what the rest of the summer brings. We can always increase also. Any questions? Thank you.
And Dean, do you still have the quarter they ceremoniously gave you when you won the coin flip to join the Common Council?
I don't know if I ever did get that. I don't think I got that. No.
Okay. Well, it's been a wonderful morning. We want to thank all of you for your attendance. We especially want to thank any of you. And Angel, do we have 1 second for county, or should?
If you would like to, but he said he does not have to speak today. But if you do have questions, he's here.
Lance Plimmel from the county board, he has graciously said that if you have a question on the county board level, he'd be happy to answer those. And as I know him personally, he's an open book anyway, anytime you want to talk to him about county board, so thank you.
Greg, if I could just say one thing real quick.
Sure.
I appreciate the collaboration with everybody. You know, I have the opportunity to represent the state organization for counties. There are counties where the legislators don't talk to the mayors, don't talk to the county boards, don't talk to law enforcement, and we are lucky in this part of central Wisconsin to have the team that we have everywhere, because we have worked together to solve a lot of these problems. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, I want to personally, and on behalf of everyone, both virtually and all those in this room today, if you are serving on any type of a board, whether that be a school board, that be in the legislature, a trade association, anything even with your church or synagogue or whatever, thank you, because we all know that's the only way in the United States that we get things accomplished. It's a people-generated country. That's just the way we do. We especially want to thank our sponsors this morning. Without that, we could never have these. That would be Domtar, Enbridge, Heartland Farms, and Payroll and Bookkeeping LLC. So if you know any folks that work at those organizations, thank them. Thank you. Round of applause for them. Want to thank our friends at Bullseye Country Club. They told me to tell you the driving range opens at noon today, and the front nine for walking only opens tomorrow. So hopefully, and they're going to try to get the back side open maybe next week, depending on weather. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Be safe, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. And again, a special thank you to our folks at the chamber and all that they do and their staff, because they obviously do a lot to promote central Wisconsin. Thank you. Have a good day.